every night was a challenge. And many times I'd be with her all day in a hospital or in a chemo suite. And I'd have to go in at night and host a show. And, QVC there's no script, there's no teleprompter. It's all in your head and your prep and what you've done. And I usually would prep 4 to 5 hours for a show. But during these times, I would literally sometimes run in an hour before, go into makeup and go on the air, and God somehow sustained me. But I had nights, I remember one night in particular, the tally light was about to come on me. I was going to do a 3-hour primetime show, huge sales goals, and both of my arms went numb, and the studio started spinning on me. I looked up, I saw all the lights going by, and I just cried out to God. I said, "Dear Lord, you have to help me. I have to do this show." And somehow things settled down, my feeling came back, and I did the show. But I developed a technique, Bob, where I would go to my mailbox and I'd open it and I'd say, I have to put my problems in here now because I have to go do a show. I'll pick you up after the show. And so I learned to compartmentalize. But there were times in the middle of a presentation, especially the summer before, we would do something called Christmas in July. And I think the thought would hit me, Beth won't be here by Christmas. And I'd have to refocus and cry out. But she was an amazing woman, and she faced death fearlessly, which is why we called our ministry Fearless Faith.
Dan Wheeler joining us today. It's NRB 2019 National Religious Broadcasters at the Anaheim Convention Center in California. This is the Meeting House on Faith Radio. Well, Dan, let's talk about Beth and how she faced the final, it would turn out to be years of her life. Again, the doctors had said she maybe had a year or so to live. She actually lived 3.
Right.
She was, as the book title suggests, she was a hurricane of love. She is someone that touched people in a positive way. Yes. And the name of the book is Hurricane of Love, My Journey with Beth Wheeler. So what are some of the ways that your late wife really dealt with the fact that she was dying?
Well, it was interesting. We wanted to pursue some natural therapies, and I had learned about what they were doing in other countries, but she had great faith in our doctor, and we had an excellent medical team. So we did chemo, and we tried to really approach it positively. Chemotherapy days became chemo dates, like we were going on a date. And we found this little soup shop in the basement of the building, and they had chocolate croissants. So when Beth would go check in at the doctor's office, I'd buy us a couple of those croissants, because in our early days of dating, we would get them in Chicago. I'd heat them up in a microwave, and we'd eat them. And then at lunch, I'd go down and get their delicious tomato basil soup. And, we discovered that tomato basil soup and croissants in a chemo suite is great if you're with the one you love. And I'd give anything to have one of those dates back. But she had that kind of positive attitude. We were going to make it through it. I remember one day we were out at the pool, and this was about 5 months before she passed, and we would just sit outside. She was getting weak, and I asked her, I said, "Are you mad at God?" She said, "No. Why would I be mad at God?" And I said, "Well, you have stage 4 cancer." She goes, "No, I just have cancer. It's not God's fault." And she was amazing. And as it got closer and things were not working out, and we spent weeks in hospitals, and it was the chemo that destroyed her bone marrow's ability to produce platelets. So the problem was with the platelets in her blood, and we were on this emotional roller coaster. We had to go down to a huge hospital because the Red Cross actually has a computer system, and they scour the country to match, a perfect match to her platelets. But her body was still rejecting them, and I remember many days in the hospital, I would just be exhausted, and I'd cry out to God and say, "God, I've got nothing left." And I would hear him say, "Well, now I can take over, because in your weakness I am made strong." And I had to totally learn to rely on him. It was something I couldn't learn my way out of. I couldn't buy my way out of. It was just we were in God's hands, and it really brought us closer together. I think those last 3 years of her life, Beth and I, our relationship was stronger than ever. And it was an honor to care for her, Bob. She would have done it for me 1,000 times over. And she just had this positive attitude. And at the end, she was seeing heaven. Her eyes were just locked on this corner of the ceiling. And I'd say, "Beth, what do you see?" And she'd say, "Heaven." And I'd say, "It is beautiful." And she'd say, "Oh, yes."